The salvaged ship drifted in pieces across the cold black of the asteroid belt. Bits of metal floated past Daniel Hart's helmet as he hung in his shattered cockpit, one arm pinned under a broken panel, the other floating loose. His radio was dead. His engines were dead, and the slow blinking red light on his console told him that something else was coming. He had crossed into Voran space by accident. The maps he carried were old, sold to him by a smuggler who swore the borders had not moved in years. The smuggler had lied. Daniel had known it for the past 10 minutes, ever since the first plasma bolt had cut his ship in half. Now 3 long ships closed in around the wreckage, smooth and dark, with no markings on their hulls. They did not need markings. Every species in this part of the galaxy knew what the Voran looked like. A wide hatch opened on the lead ship. A magnetic beam reached out and pulled Daniel and his broken cockpit inside. The metal floor caught him with a heavy thud. He waited. He did not struggle. The doors of the cockpit were torn open. Tall figures in dark armor stepped through. They were lizard-like, with long necks and slit eyes, almost 3 meters tall. Their scales shimmered under the ship lights. One of them grabbed Daniel by the collar of his suit and lifted him off the floor like he weighed nothing. Soft skin, the alien hissed in rough common. Small bones. A death worlder, but a weak one. Daniel said nothing. He looked the alien in the eyes and gave a small, tired smile. That smile bothered the alien more than any insult would have. The grip on his collar tightened, and Daniel felt his suit creak. Then he was thrown onto the floor. Heavy boots pushed him forward, down a narrow corridor that grew colder with every step. The Voran ship was nothing like a human ship. The walls were dark metal, slick with frost. The air smelled of cold iron. Tubes ran along the ceiling, leaking faint white mist. Daniel's breath came out in clouds. He was pushed into a small holding cell. The door slid shut. The alien guard stood outside, watching him through a clear window. Daniel sat down on the cold floor and rested his back against the wall. He closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them again. He had to think. His ship was gone. His crew, 2 friends he had known for years, had been on a different run that week. He was alone. He had no weapon, no tools, no way out. But he was still breathing, and that was enough for now. The journey took 2 days. The Voran fed him nothing. They gave him a small cup of water once. The cold inside the cell grew worse. By the 2nd day, frost had formed on the walls and on the edges of his suit. Daniel rubbed his hands together, breathed on them, and waited. When the ship finally docked, he was pulled out of the cell and marched through long, freezing corridors. They were inside a massive prison station. He could tell from the slow rumble under his boots and the deep gravity. Through narrow windows, he saw a frozen ice moon below, white and cracked, glowing under a pale red sun. Other prisoners watched him as he passed. They came in many shapes. Tall, thin ones with feathers. Short, round ones with 3 eyes. A few small ones that looked almost like furry children. They were locked behind clear walls, and they all stared at the human with the same expression. It was not fear for themselves. It was pity for him. Daniel kept his head up. He did not show that he had noticed. He was brought into a wide hall with high ceilings and rows of black stone benches. At the far end stood a tall Voran in deep red armor. Unlike the guards, his scales were darker, almost black, and a long scar ran across his snout. His eyes were sharp and yellow. "I am Warden Threll," the alien said in cold common. "You have entered the space of the Voran Dominion without permission. You have damaged our patrol records. You are sentenced to death." Daniel rolled his shoulders. They were stiff from the cold. "Could I have some water?" he asked. His voice was calm. "I have not had a drink since yesterday." The hall went quiet. The guards looked at each other. Threll's tail flicked behind him. "You asked for water," Threll said slowly, "when you stand before your own death." "I am thirsty," Daniel said. "Whether I die today or tomorrow, I would still like some water." A long silence followed. Then Threll let out a short, cold laugh. "Bring him water," he said. "Let him drink before the chamber. It will not save him." A small alien with gray skin and large dark eyes hurried forward with a metal cup. The little alien did not look at Daniel as he handed it over, but his hands were shaking. Daniel took the cup, gave a small nod, and drank slowly. The water was cold and clean. It was the best thing he had tasted in days. He handed the empty cup back. "Thank you," he said softly. The gray alien blinked, then quickly stepped back into line. Threll watched the human carefully now. Something about him did not fit. Prisoners begged. Prisoners cursed. Prisoners cried. This one drank his water and said thank you. The warden waved a clawed hand. Take him to the chamber, he ordered. Prepare the deep cold. The guards moved forward, and Daniel followed without resistance, walking calmly between them as the doors slid open and a wall of icy air rolled out from the corridor beyond. News of the strange human spread through the prison station faster than the guards could stop it. By the time Daniel was being led toward the holding pens of the lower decks, every prisoner on every level had already heard the story. A Deathworlder had asked for water before his execution. A Deathworlder had said thank you. A Deathworlder had walked behind the guards instead of being dragged. In the cell next to Daniel's, a tall feathered alien pressed against the clear wall, watching him with wide yellow eyes. Across the corridor, two short round prisoners whispered to each other in a fast clicking language. Word traveled along the rows like wind through dry grass. Daniel sat down on the bench inside his cell. The bench was cold metal, no padding, no blanket. The walls dripped with frost. He was given a thin gray suit to wear in place of his salvage gear, and they had taken his boots. His feet rested on the freezing floor. He did not complain. He pulled his knees up, leaned back against the wall, and tried to slow his breathing. Cold was an enemy he had fought before. Long hauls and damaged ships, broken life support, frozen cargo runs. He had been cold for most of his working life. The Vorin did not know that. A small movement caught his eye. The gray-skinned alien from the hall, the one who had brought him water, was passing by the corridor with a tray of empty cups. The little one slowed near Daniel's cell, eyes flicking left and right, then quickly slid something through the slot at the bottom of the door. It was a small piece of dried bread. Daniel reached for it slowly so the cameras would not catch the movement clearly. He hid it in the folds of his suit. He looked up, but the gray alien was already gone. A few hours later, a deep horn sounded across the station. The lights dimmed and turned a dull red. Speakers in every corridor crackled to life. Public sentencing in the central hall. A flat voice announced in many languages. All prisoners and station staff are ordered to attend. Cell doors began to open in slow waves. Guards in dark armor walked the corridors, herding the prisoners forward. Daniel was pulled from his cell and joined a long line of beings shuffling toward the central hall. None of them spoke. The only sound was the soft hiss of frosted air and the heavy thud of guard boots. The central hall was huge. A high domed ceiling rose far above, and rings of stone seats curved around a flat circular floor. The seats filled quickly with prisoners of every shape, every color. The Vorin guards stood along the walls with long stun rods. At the very top of the room, on a raised platform, sat Warden Threll on a black stone chair. Daniel was led down to the center of the floor. He stood alone in the circle, small and pale under the white lights. Threll rose from his chair. His voice rang out clear across the hall. This human entered our territory. He damaged our property. He carries the scent of a death world. By the law of the Dominion, his life is forfeit. Murmurs ran through the rows of prisoners. The guards shifted their grip on their stun rods. As is our tradition, Threll continued, his end will serve as a lesson. He will be executed by the deep cold chamber, our finest method, used on every species that has dared defy us. None have survived. None will. A murmur ran through the hall again, this time deeper, almost like a low moan. Daniel guessed many of the prisoners had lost friends or family to that chamber. Threll looked down at the human. Do you have any final words, Deathworlder? Daniel tilted his head. He looked around the hall slowly, at the rows of frightened, tired faces, at the guards with their cold, scaled hands, at the warden with his proud yellow eyes. Then he looked back at Threll. I hope the chamber is clean, he said. The hall went completely still. For a long moment, no one spoke. The guards looked at each other. A few prisoners blinked in confusion. Threll's tail flicked once, sharply. Clean? The warden repeated. Yes, Daniel said. I would not want to catch something. Somewhere in the upper rows, a single short alien made a strange high noise, almost like a stifled laugh, and was quickly silenced by a guard's stun rod. The sound bounced once around the hall before fading. Threll's eyes narrowed. He had presided over thousands of executions. He had seen prisoners scream, beg, bite their own tongues, attack the guards. He had never seen one make a joke. A figure near the side of the platform leaned forward. He was a thinner Vorin with pale silver scales and small glasses fixed over his eyes. A small recorder floated near his shoulder. This was Dr. Oven, the chief science officer of the station. His tail was twitching with interest. Oven spoke quietly to Threll, but Daniel could read the look on his face. The doctor was fascinated. He was studying the human as if Daniel were a strange new sample under a glass. Threll waved Oven back and faced the hall again. "Take him to the chamber," he ordered. "Begin the deep cold. Full cycle." The guard stepped forward. Daniel did not resist. He let them grip his arms. As they turned him to leave, his eyes met those of the small gray alien standing near the side door, the one who had given him bread. The little alien gave him a tiny, almost invisible nod. Daniel returned it with the smallest smile. Then the doors of the central hall slid open, and the cold breath of the chamber rolled out to meet him. The corridor leading to the deep cold chamber was the coldest place Daniel had ever walked through. Frost coated every surface in thick white layers. The air itself seemed to bite at his face, his ears, his fingertips. The two guards holding his arms wore heavy thermal cloaks, and even they walked stiffly, their tails curled tight against their bodies. Daniel breathed slowly, in through the nose, out through the mouth. His old salvage instructor had taught him that trick years ago. Panic burns oxygen. Calm saves it. He kept his pace steady and let the guards lead him. The corridor ended at a massive round door made of dark blue metal. Strange symbols glowed faintly along its edge. Two engineers stood beside a control panel, working quickly with shaking hands. They glanced at the human and quickly looked away. The door split open with a deep hiss. White mist poured out in a thick wave, rolling across the floor like a slow river. Inside, Daniel could see a small round chamber with a single raised platform in the center. Pipes lined the walls. Thin needles of frost hung from the ceiling. Dr. Oven appeared at the side of the corridor, holding a small flat device in his clawed hands. His silver scales glittered under the blue lights. He stepped close to Daniel and studied his face with sharp curiosity. "Most species cry by now," Oven said quietly, almost to himself. "Or they fight. You do neither." Daniel looked at him. "Crying makes the air colder in your lungs," he said. "Fighting makes you sweat. Sweat freezes." Oven froze for a moment, then quickly tapped notes into his device. "You have been cold before," the doctor said. "Many times. Not like this." Daniel did not answer. The guards pushed him forward. He stepped onto the platform inside the chamber. The metal under his bare feet burned like fire from the cold. The door slid shut behind him with a heavy thud. He was alone. Outside the chamber, through a small clear window, he could see Threll watching with arms crossed. Dr. Oven stood beside him, eyes fixed on his readings. The engineers worked the controls. A soft hiss filled the chamber. Tiny holes opened along the walls, and a fine mist began to spray inward. The temperature dropped fast. Daniel watched his own breath turn from white clouds to thin, sharp lines that vanished almost as soon as they left his mouth. He sat down on the platform, crossed his legs, and rested his hands on his knees. He kept his eyes half closed. He did not fight the cold. He let it come. The cold pushed deep into his skin. His fingers stopped feeling like fingers. His feet became distant, as if they belonged to someone else. His shoulders began to shake, then slowed, then stopped. His heart beat slower. His breathing grew shallow. Through the window, Threll smiled coldly. "He is going still," the warden said. "It will not be long now." Dr. Oven watched his readings closely. The numbers fell as expected. Body temperature dropping, pulse slowing, brain activity fading into the low, dull pattern of a creature shutting down. He had seen this many times. He nodded slowly, but then his eyes narrowed. There was a small flicker on the readings. A pulse where no pulse should be. He tapped the screen and frowned. "Sensor error," one of the engineers muttered. Oven almost agreed. Almost. But something in his gut, an old scientist instinct, told him to keep watching. He said nothing to Threll. He simply made a note. Inside the chamber, Daniel had stopped moving. His skin had turned a pale blue-gray. Tiny crystals of frost grew on his hair, on his eyelashes, on his fingers. His chest no longer rose. His head tilted slightly to one side. Hours passed. The chamber ran its full cycle, longer than any cycle Threll had ever ordered. 6 hours. Then 8. Then 10. The temperature inside was cold enough to crack steel. The engineers stamped their feet to stay warm in the corridor outside. Threll grew bored and went to drink something hot in his office. Dr. Oven stayed behind, watching every line on his screen. That tiny flicker came back. Then again. Then again. It was not a sensor error. It was a slow, weak, but steady rhythm, like a heart that was still there, far underneath, hiding. Oven's tail flicked nervously. He told himself it was a dying signal, the last echo of a body that had not fully shut down yet. After 12 hours, the cycle ended. The mist stopped. The pipes hissed and slowly drew the cold back into themselves. Threll returned. He nodded to the engineers. "Open it," he said. "Bring out the body." The door split open. Mist rolled out again, but thinner this time. 2 guards in heavy gloves stepped inside with a long metal cart. They lifted Daniel's frozen body carefully. He was stiff, blue, his skin hard like stone. His eyes were closed. His arms were locked in their sitting position. They carried him out and laid him on the cart. Frost cracked off his shoulders in small pieces. "Take him to the disposal bay," Threll ordered. He turned his back on the body. "And clean the chamber. Tomorrow we have 3 more. The guards began to push the cart down the corridor. Dr. Oven walked slowly beside it, still watching his small device. The pulse readings were still flickering. Faint. Slow. But there. Just before the cart reached the disposal bay door, one of Daniel's frozen fingers twitched. Oven stopped walking. He stared at the hand. The guards had not noticed. They were chatting quietly to each other, complaining about the long shift. The finger twitched again. Then a second finger. Dr. Oven's mouth opened slowly. His scientific mind tried to find a normal explanation. There was none. He took one careful step back from the cart. The 2 guards pushing the cart were laughing about the long shift when one of them felt the cart tremble. He thought it was just a bump in the floor. He kept walking. Then he felt it again, a small shake under his hand. He looked down. The frozen body was moving. The guard's eyes went wide. He tried to speak, but only a strange high noise came out of his throat. His partner turned around, saw the same thing, and dropped his end of the cart. The metal hit the floor with a heavy clang. Daniel's chest rose. It was a small rise, slow and careful, but it was a breath. Frost cracked along his ribs. Tiny pieces of ice fell off his shoulders. His blue-gray skin began to shift in color, slowly returning to a paler human tone. His eyes opened. The guards screamed. They turned and ran. Their stun rods clattered to the floor. Dr. Oven pressed himself flat against the corridor wall, his recorder still floating beside him, still capturing every moment. Daniel sat up slowly on the cart. His joints cracked. He flexed his fingers one by one, then his toes. He turned his head from side to side, working out the stiffness. He looked down at his own arms, blinked at the frost still clinging to his skin, and gave a small grunt of mild discomfort. He looked at Dr. Oven. "Excuse me," he said. His voice was hoarse but calm. "Is breakfast ready?" Oven stared. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. Daniel rubbed his hands together to warm them. He swung his legs off the cart and put his bare feet on the floor. He winced once at the cold, then stood up. He stretched his arms above his head until his back gave a satisfying pop. "That was a long sleep," he said. The corridor alarms started screaming. Red lights flashed. Boots pounded down the hall. Within a minute, 6 guards arrived, weapons raised. Behind them came Warden Threll, his red armor gleaming, his yellow eyes wide with fury and disbelief. He stopped at the edge of the corridor and stared at the human standing on the cold floor. "Impossible," Threll hissed. Daniel gave him a small wave. Threll's tail lashed behind him. His claws flexed. He turned to the engineers running up behind him. "Refreeze him," he snapped. "Now? Full cycle. Lower the temperature. Twice as long." Daniel raised one finger. "Could I have water first?" he asked politely. "And maybe a blanket. Just for a few minutes." "Silence," Threll roared. The guards moved in. They grabbed Daniel and dragged him back toward the chamber. He did not resist, but his eyes met Dr. Oven's as he passed. The doctor stood frozen against the wall, his small device clutched in shaking claws. Daniel was thrown back into the chamber. The door slammed shut. The engineers pushed the controls past every safety mark. The mist returned, colder than before. The temperature inside dropped to a level that should have shattered bone. Through the window, Threll watched with his teeth bared. He paced back and forth like a caged animal. He muttered to himself, then to the guards, then to no one. Dr. Oven came up beside him quietly. "Warden," he said in a soft voice, "I think we should discuss." "There is nothing to discuss," Thrall snapped. "He is a freak. The chamber failed. We will not fail twice." Oven said nothing more. He stepped back and watched the screens. The same flicker appeared again. The same slow, weak pulse, hidden deep inside the human's body, refusing to die. He recorded everything. 20 hours passed. Then 24. The chamber was opened. Daniel sat in the middle of the platform, frozen solid, head bowed. The guards approached carefully this time. They lifted him out with metal tongs, not gloves. They placed him gently on the floor of the corridor and stepped back. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Daniel's head lifted. His eyes opened. He blinked slowly, looked around, and rolled his shoulders. "Stiff neck," he said. A guard fainted. The other guards stumbled back. 2 of them ran. Thrall stood in the center of the corridor, breathing hard, his claws shaking. Daniel stood up. He patted the frost off his arms. He looked at the warden. "That was colder than the last one," he said. His tone was friendly, almost like a man giving feedback. "But I think the seal on the left wall is leaking. You might want to check it." Thrall lunged. His clawed hand swung at Daniel's throat. Daniel stepped to the side without effort. The warden's claws caught only empty air. 2 guards quickly grabbed Thrall's arms and held him back. "Warden," one of them said carefully, "the prisoners are watching the corridor cameras. We must not lose composure in front of them." Thrall froze. He looked up. The corridor cameras were indeed live. Across the station, in every cell, on every screen, prisoners of all species were watching. They had seen the human walk out of the deep cold for the second time. The whole station knew now. Thrall pulled his arms free and straightened his armor. He gave Daniel one final hateful look, then turned and walked away, his tail dragging slow on the floor. Dr. Oven came forward. His voice was very quiet. "Take him back to his cell," he told the guards. "Bring him a blanket. And water." The guards looked confused, but they obeyed. Daniel was led away gently this time, almost respectfully. As he walked, the small gray alien with dark eyes watched from the side passage. For the first time, the little alien smiled. And in cells across the station, prisoners pressed their hands to the clear walls, watching, whispering, hoping. By the 3rd day, the prison station had changed in ways that could not be measured by instruments. The cold corridors felt different. The guards walked with stiffer shoulders. The prisoners stood closer to the front of their cells. Conversations that had once been whispered in fear were now whispered in something else, something almost like hope. Warden Thrall had not slept. He sat in his command room high above the station, surrounded by glowing screens. Each screen showed a different angle of Daniel Hart's cell. Each screen showed the same thing. The human was sitting on his bench, wrapped in a thin gray blanket, slowly eating a piece of dry bread. Calm, quiet, alive. Thrall smashed his fist against the table. The metal dented under his claws. Behind him, Dr. Oven spoke carefully. "Warden, I have completed my initial study," he said. "Permission to share my findings." Thrall did not turn around. "Speak." Oven held up his small device. "The human comes from a world that we marked as a death world category 3. Heavy gravity, harsh climates, large temperature differences. But our records were incomplete. Their species spent most of its early history in cold conditions. Ice ages. Long winters. Their bodies adapted in ways no other intelligent species ever needed to." He tapped the screen. "Their cells survive freezing without breaking apart. Their hearts can slow to almost nothing and still recover. Their brains can shut down for short periods and restart with no damage. We are not killing him, Warden. We are putting him to sleep." Thrall's tail flicked slowly. "Then we will use heat," he said. Oven shook his head. "Heat will likely work. Many things will work. But cold will not. And the prisoners now know this. The story has spread." Thrall turned. His yellow eyes were tired, hollow, dangerous. "Then we try heat. Or pressure. Or both. We do not stop until he is ash." Oven hesitated. Then he bowed his head. "As you command." He left the command room. In the corridor outside, he stopped for a moment, leaning against the cold metal wall. He looked down at his recorder, at the long files of data he had gathered. His scientist mind kept circling one thought. The human had not done anything wrong by his own measure. He had crossed a border he did not see. He had asked for water. He had said thank you. He had survived. Oven slowly walked toward the lower decks. In Daniel's cell, the small gray alien was sweeping the floor outside. He moved his broom slowly, glancing at the camera in the corner, waiting until it turned the other way. Then he leaned close to the gap at the bottom of the door. "My name is Tommy," he whispered. "I am a Velian. My people were taken 60 cycles ago. I work the cleaning shift." Daniel did not move from his bench. He spoke without looking up, just loud enough. "I am Daniel." "I know," Tommy whispered. "Everyone knows." A small silence passed. "They will try again," Tommy said. "Heat this time. Or worse." "I expected as much," Daniel said calmly. "They will not stop. They cannot stop. The warden has lost his standing. If you survive again, the whole station will not obey him." Daniel looked up at the ceiling, then down at his hands. "What do the prisoners say?" he asked. Tommy swept a little farther down the corridor, then back. "They say you are a sign. They say humans are not what we were told. They say if one of you cannot be killed, then maybe we do not have to be afraid anymore. They are afraid still." "They are. But less than yesterday." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. "Tommy," he said, "I am not going to do anything dangerous. I am not going to fight anyone. But if your people want a chance to walk out of here, I think this is the moment. Not because of me. Because of them. Because they are watching. Because they can see the cracks now." Tommy's broom stopped moving. "What do you need from me?" "Nothing yet," Daniel said softly. "Just keep listening. And if you can, find others who clean. Others who carry food. Others who fix doors. Quiet ones. Trusted ones. The kind no one watches." Tommy gave the smallest nod and continued sweeping down the corridor. That night, Daniel was taken from his cell again. This time the guards wore heat shielding, and the corridor they walked through was different. It was lined with red lights. The air grew warmer with every step. They reached a new chamber, this one with thick black walls and pipes that glowed faintly orange. Threll was waiting beside the door. "This is the heat chamber," the warden said. "It melts metal. It will melt you." Daniel looked at the chamber, then at Threll. Threll struck him across the face. Daniel's head snapped sideways. A line of red appeared on his cheek. He turned his head back slowly and met Threll's eyes again. He did not speak. He did not need to. Threll stepped back, almost flinching from his own action. Dr. Oven watched from the side, recording. Daniel was placed inside the chamber. The door shut. The heat began to rise. It rose for a long time. The chamber glowed bright orange, then red, then white. The metal floor outside grew hot enough to burn the guards' boots. They stepped back. Threll watched without blinking. Hours later, the chamber was opened. Daniel sat inside, his blanket gone, his hair singed, his skin red and shining with sweat. His eyebrows were almost burnt off. He coughed once, then twice, then looked up at the open door. "That was uncomfortable," he said hoarsely. A long silence followed. Then, somewhere in the corridor behind the guards, a single voice from a nearby cell laughed. Then another. Then 10 more. Then 100. The whole station was laughing. And Threll, standing very still in the heat, finally understood that he had already lost. The laughter in the corridors did not stop. It spread through the vents, through the speakers, through the halls. Even after the guards rushed to silence the cells, the sound kept echoing in the metal walls, low and steady, as if the station itself was breathing differently now. Daniel was returned to his cell. His skin was sore from the heat, but already healing. Tommy brought him cool water and a clean cloth without being told. The gray little alien said nothing, but his eyes shone with something new. In the command room, Threll sat alone in the dark. His armor was unstrapped at the shoulders. His tail dragged on the floor. The screens around him showed the prisoners standing at the front of their cells, watching, waiting. The guards had stopped patrolling in pairs. Now they walked in groups of 4, and even then, slowly. A soft chime sounded. Dr. Oven entered. "Warden," he said, "I must speak." Threll did not look up. "Speak, then." "You will not break this human," Oven said carefully. "Not with cold. Not with heat. Not with pressure. He is not built to break. And every time you try, the station loses a little more of its order. The prisoners are not afraid of you anymore. They are afraid of being on the wrong side when this ends." "There is no ending," Threll growled. "The Dominion does not lose. The Dominion is not here right now," Oven said quietly. "We are, and we are losing." Threll lifted his head, slow and tired. "What do you want me to do?" Release him, Oven said. Send him back. Make a deal with his people. Or at least move him to a different station. End this performance before it ends us. Pharrell laughed. It was a thin, broken sound. And admit defeat to a soft-skinned creature who said thank you for water? Yes. The warden looked at Oven for a long moment. Then he turned back to his screens. Bring him to the central hall, he said. One last time. If he cannot die in the chambers, he will die in front of every prisoner. By my own hand. Oven's tail dropped low. Warden, please. Bring him. Oven left. He walked slowly through the corridors, past the cells, past the listening prisoners. He reached the lower decks and found Tommy sweeping near Daniel's cell. The small gray alien froze when he saw the doctor. Oven knelt down. His voice was almost a whisper. He is going to call him to the central hall. Threll plans to kill him there himself. The cameras will broadcast everywhere on the station. Tommy's eyes filled with quiet fear. What do we do? Oven paused. He looked at the camera in the corner of the corridor. The light on it had been blinking the wrong color for 2 days now. He had noticed. He had said nothing. Tell whoever you trust, he said. Tell them to be ready. The power for the chambers runs through panel D in the lower west wing. If that panel goes down, no chamber will work anywhere on the station. Tommy nodded, very small, very fast. Oven stood and walked away. He did not look back. An hour later, Daniel was led into the central hall again. The seats were full. Every prisoner had been brought to watch. Every guard stood along the walls. Threll stood in the center of the floor this time, not on his platform. He held a long curved blade in his clawed hand. Daniel walked into the circle calmly. His sore skin was hidden under a fresh gray suit. His face was tired, but his eyes were steady. Threll lifted the blade. You will not survive this, he said. Cold is one thing. Heat is one thing. But steel through the heart is final, even for a death worlder. Daniel did not move. You are right, he said. Steel would end me. But you are not going to use it. Why not? Because everyone here is watching. And they have just decided. Threll frowned. At that exact moment, the lights in the hall flickered, then dimmed, then went out completely. Red emergency lights snapped on instead. From the distant west wing, a low boom rolled through the floor. Panel D was gone. A single voice rose from the upper rows. Then another. Then dozens. Then hundreds. The prisoners stood up together, all at once, in every row. They did not rush. They did not scream. They simply stood and faced the warden and the guards and waited. The guards looked at each other. Half of them lowered their stun rods. A few turned and walked toward the doors. Threll spun around, blade still raised, and saw his own people stepping back from him. Warden, Oven said very calmly. Put the blade down. Please. Threll's hand shook. He looked at Daniel. He looked at the blade. He looked at the prisoners. He dropped the blade. The metal rang once on the stone floor. Daniel walked over and picked it up. He did not point it at anyone. He simply held it, then handed it gently to a guard standing nearby. The guard accepted it without a word. Daniel turned to face the cameras at the top of the hall. My name is Daniel Hart, he said quietly. I am a human. I came here by accident. I was sentenced to die. I did not. Not because I am special. Because the people who built me lived through long, cold winters, and cold is just weather where I come from. He looked into the lens. To the Vorin Dominion. We are not your prey. We are not weak. We do not want war. But if you come for us with your chambers and your blades, you will find that we wake up. He lowered his eyes. To everyone else listening. The doors are open. A Vorin rescue fleet arrived 16 hours later. They found an empty station. No guards. No warden. No prisoners. Only a single recording, looping on every channel, and a quiet line of writing scratched into the metal wall of the central hall. It said, Cold is just weather.